You notice things other people miss. A change in tone. A pause that lasts half a second too long. A smile that doesn't reach the eyes. And yet somehow, you are the one who feels too much, too sensitive, or hard to deal with. You start to wonder, if you understand so much, why does life feel this heavy? In this video, you will understand why certain problems seem invisible to others, but painfully obvious to you. You will see how high sensitivity shapes the way you think, feel, and relate to people, and why this is not a weakness, but a pattern that needs to be understood. When you see it clearly, something inside you begins to settle. You often feel overwhelmed, not because you are weak, but because your mind processes more information than most people ever register. You don't just hear words, you absorb the emotional tone behind them. When someone says, "I'm fine," you immediately sense whether that's true or not. In everyday life, this means simple situations drain you faster than they drain others. A noisy room, a tense conversation, or even a long day of small talk can leave you exhausted. Others walk away unaffected, while you need silence to recover. That's why you sometimes feel broken or out of place, because the world is built for people who filter less, not for those who feel deeply. And here you start to notice another detail. You take things personally even when no one intends to hurt you. Not because you are insecure, but because you naturally look for meaning. When someone replies late, speaks coldly, or seems distant, your mind starts connecting dots. You ask yourself what you did wrong. You replay conversations in your head. For example, after a casual comment from a partner, you spend the evening analyzing their tone, while they have already forgotten the moment. The emotional consequence is subtle but painful. You carry weight that was never meant to be yours, and over time you feel unnecessary or easily replaceable. But this is only part of the picture. You often struggle with boundaries, especially emotional ones. You feel responsible for other people's moods. If someone close to you is upset, you sense it immediately, and you want to fix it. You listen longer, give more, and stay silent about your own needs. In relationships, this might look like always being the understanding one, the patient one, the one who adapts. Meanwhile, the other person slowly gets used to your emotional labor. That's why you end up feeling unseen or taken for granted. Not because you give too little, but because you give without protecting yourself. The situation becomes more complicated when you realize how deeply you are affected by conflict. Even minor tension feels intense to you. Raised voices, passive-aggressive comments, or emotional distance don't just bother you, they destabilize you. While others can argue and move on, your body stays in a state of alert. You might avoid confrontation altogether, choosing peace over honesty. For example, instead of saying what hurts you, you tell yourself it's not worth it. The emotional cost is high. Resentment builds quietly, and respect, both for yourself and from others, slowly fades. And then there is this confusing contradiction. You are deeply empathetic, yet you often feel misunderstood. You understand others easily, but they rarely understand you. When you try to explain your feelings, people may say you are overreacting or thinking too much. After hearing this repeatedly, you start doubting your own perception. You tell yourself to toughen up, to be less sensitive, to feel less. That's why you feel lonely even when surrounded by people. Your inner world is rich and complex, but you rarely feel safe enough to share it fully. Another detail quietly shapes your life. You are highly sensitive to authenticity. You instantly sense when someone is fake, manipulative, or emotionally unavailable, even if they appear charming on the surface. This makes you cautious, sometimes withdrawn. You may distance yourself without being able to explain why. In a workplace or family setting, you might feel tension around someone everyone else seems to like. The emotional consequence is isolation. You start feeling like you don't belong, not because you are antisocial, but because your nervous system reacts to subtleties others ignore. And there is something else most people don't talk about. You often feel a deep sense of meaninglessness when your life lacks emotional depth. Routine, shallow conversations, or purely material goals leave you feeling empty. You need purpose, connection, and emotional truth to feel alive. When your environment doesn't offer that, you may feel lost or unmotivated. Others call it laziness or dissatisfaction, but for you, It's a signal that something essential is missing. All of these experiences are connected. They are not random flaws. They are the result of a nervous system that is finely tuned to the world. You don't just exist in life, you experience it intensely. That intensity can feel like a burden when you don't understand it, but it also carries a quiet strength. When you begin to see these patterns clearly, you stop asking what's wrong with you. You start asking a different question, one that changes everything. You start asking why you were never taught how to live with this sensitivity instead of fighting it. Because the real problem was never your depth. It was the lack of understanding around it. When you don't recognize your own nature, you adapt to people who don't feel the way you do. You shrink your reactions. You silence your intuition. And slowly, you disconnect from yourself. This becomes especially clear in relationships. You often attract people who benefit from your sensitivity but don't respect it. Emotionally distant partners, self-centered friends, family members who expect understanding but rarely give it back. At first, they feel familiar. You sense their unspoken wounds and step in without being asked. You become the listener, the stabilizer, the one who stays calm. Over time, you notice a pattern. Your needs are postponed, minimized, or ignored. That's why you feel emotionally tired even in relationships that are supposed to feel safe. And here something important happens inside you. You begin to confuse tolerance with love. You endure things that quietly hurt you because you believe your role is to understand, not to demand. When someone crosses a line, you explain it away. When they disappoint you, you search for reasons to excuse them. The emotional consequence is subtle but serious. People stop taking responsibility for how they treat you because you carry the emotional weight for both sides. But this is only part of the picture. You are also deeply affected by unspoken expectations. You sense what others want before they say it. You adjust your behavior instinctively. In a group, you read the room and adapt to maintain harmony. Others call this kindness. But over time, you lose touch with what you actually want. That's why you sometimes feel empty or disconnected from your own desires. You've spent so much energy tuning into others that your own inner voice becomes quiet. The situation becomes even more complicated when you try to explain this to someone who isn't highly sensitive. They listen, but they don't feel it. They offer simple advice. Don't overthink. Just ignore it. It's not that deep. And you nod, even though something inside you knows they don't understand. This is where self-doubt begins. You start questioning your perception instead of trusting it. And that's how sensitivity turns from awareness into self-criticism. Another important detail often goes unnoticed. Your body reacts faster than your mind. You may feel tension, anxiety, or fatigue without knowing why. It's because your nervous system processes emotional information instantly. When you stay in environments that feel wrong for too long, constant stress, emotional coldness, subtle disrespect, your body carries the cost. That's why rest doesn't always help. What you need is alignment, not just relaxation. And yet there is a strength hidden in all of this. When you are highly sensitive, you have an unusual capacity for insight. You see patterns in people's behavior. You sense shifts before they become obvious. You understand emotions not as concepts, but as lived experiences. This is why you often give good advice, even if you struggle to follow it yourself. You see the truth clearly, except when it comes to protecting your own boundaries. The turning point comes when you realize that sensitivity is not meant to be exposed everywhere. It needs structure. It needs limits. You don't need to feel less. You need to choose where and with whom you allow that depth. When you stop over-explaining yourself, stop absorbing emotions that aren't yours, and stop proving your worth through understanding, something changes. People either rise to meet you with respect, or they fade out of your life. And that is not loss. That is clarity. You begin to notice that when you respect your own sensitivity, others adjust. Conversations become cleaner. Relationships feel lighter. You no longer chase emotional validation because you are no longer abandoning yourself. You still feel deeply, but now it serves you instead of draining you. You can't change how the world is built. You can't make others more aware or more gentle. But you can stop treating your sensitivity as a problem that needs fixing. It is a signal. a guide, a form of intelligence that works quietly but precisely. When you understand these mechanisms, your life doesn't become easier, but it becomes honest. And honesty is where real strength begins.